My name's Clarke and I'm a science teacher at Royal Russell School in Croydon. I found the challenge of trying to really analyse what my practice is has been really good, and just the journey that I've had to go on and that my students have had to go on moving from kind of the assumption that summative assessment is everything that you need, to becoming much more confident in knowing that what I think really matters, and kind of formative assessment and teacher assessment is absolutely valid when it comes to inquiry things. I found that I'm much more happy with letting the kids kind of make mistakes, that just letting them get on and do, that it doesn't really matter if they do things different to what I would have told them to do, that as long as they're safe, that I can just let them get on with things, and I can kind of let them try things and let them experiment. I've tried to kind of make most of my practical things have at least an element of kind of inquiry based. So rather than giving them the answer saying, right, let's find out what it is. So I think they found that kind of helpful in that they're trying to think about why things happen. But I've definitely got some lessons that are much more heavily inquiry based. And for those ones, initially, particularly the older ones did find that difficult. They kind of went, well, we don't know what to do with this. And so I did find I had to scaffold it much more for them at the beginning. But particularly for classes where I've really persevered with it, and for me that's been much more with the younger years, I've found that they really enjoy it, and actually they like just kind of mucking in and trying things, and they know that they're not going to be told off for making mistakes, because if they proved that, I don't know, Hooke's law doesn't work, then that's what they proved. And then we try and think about, well, why? What might happen? Because yours disagrees with every other experiment that's happened. So what is going on with yours? And knowing that there isn't a kind of a wrong answer. There's just there's a difference, and there might be a reason why theirs looks different, but it's totally okay if it does look different. I find it's much less artificial. The science that we tend to do in schools is quite it's artificial. It's very much sort of, this is the experiment that will work, and when it doesn't work, you've got the teacher at the front going, oh no, this whole thing's fallen apart, it's supposed to do this, I promise you it does do this. And the kids are all sitting there going, oh yeah, because science is always supposed to work, and that's the impression that they get from all the demonstrations that we do and from the practicals that we do. They get the impression that science always works, and it really doesn't. And I think it gives them a much wider view of what it's like to work as a scientist, and so they can have experiments where actually they prove nothing other than that this doesn't affect this, and they can have experiments where things don't turn out the way that they expected them to, and they have to rely on their classmates to help them out for things, and so I think that's a really, really positive one. It also just gives a huge range of skills. If you're only ever doing demos, they don't get to work in groups. If you're only doing set practicals, they don't get that kind of creative thinking. They don't really get to think about why something might have gone wrong. They don't really get to kind of to see how they work under stress. They don't really kind of, it's all, it just means that they have a much wider range of skills that they actually then develop. I think some of the biggest challenges, firstly was in my own thinking, the kind of whole idea of, okay, how do I bring this back to summative, and kind of having to let go of that. And part of that was through discussion, part of that was through just kind of continuing on with it and going, actually, I know what these kids are like. I could point out to you in my class who is good at this and who isn't, and actually having other people coming and watching that and then saying, so what did you notice about these children? Being able to go, actually no, well, this person's good at this and this person's good at this, and going, actually I do know these kids, I do know what they're good at, and while I can't give you a number and while I can't give you a letter, I can tell you what they're good at, and I can tell you how they're getting on in things. So that was one. The kids' resistance even to then wanting to try new things, that was initially a challenge, but through sort of scaffolding and kind of just repeating it and just kind of going, no, it is okay, and just reinforcing at the start of every inquiry-based thing, saying, it's okay if you get an answer different to the one you expected. It is okay if this doesn't work as you planned. It's okay if your question reveals that there's no relationship, and just making sure that that's reinforced all the time, so they never feel like they have to have the right answer. And things like the orange experiment, where they're looking at floating, when actually if you use different fruits, there's different reasons why they float. And so them going, "Miss, is it because of this?" And I'm going, "I have no idea, you tell me." And I genuinely don't know what the answer is. That's really quite nice, and really kind of helped me in kind of going, "No, it's okay, you can do this. I don't know the answer, you've got to tell me." And I think the last thing was fitting it in initially. Because some of the inquiry-based skills can be done very, very short time, but when you want to give them the opportunity of forming their own questions and planning their own experiments and carrying them out and then analysing them, it can take quite a long time to fit an entire module in. So it's, as we've gone along throughout the kind of the 3 years, I've been much better at building it in, and so when you plan it right from the start, it is much easier to plan it in, because you leave those kind of, okay, I'll leave a couple of lessons here because we'll carry this experiment on and things like that. And I'm taking on a head of department role next year, and I'm looking forward to being able to plan in a bit more, particularly for the slightly older years, which so far is something I haven't done as much of. But being able to plan that, being the person in charge of that, I'm quite looking forward to that.